So I met a couple named Danielle and Vicki in Agua Prieta, which is in the state of Sonora. It's one of the northern states along the U.S.-Mexico border, and it borders Arizona. And I met Danielle and Vicki at church. They go to a Presbyterian church in Agua Prieta, and this church is really funny because it's almost all Chiapans, and Chiapas is the southernmost state in Mexico, and it's a place where a lot of people have been migrating from. And so there are a lot of migrants who have come to the border from Chiapas, and it just so happens that a lot of them are Presbyterian. And so this church has this wonderful community of almost all people who aren't from that area. And so Danielle and Vicki have been married about 20 years, and they've lived in Agua Prieta for about 10. And they came to Agua Prieta because they are from a farming community, a coffee growing community. Their community of Salvador Urbina grows almost solely coffee beans and not much else. And over the last 20 years, coffee has taken a real hit, and they weren't able to make enough money off of their fields. And this is really affecting their community because everyone's involved in that business and everyone's involved in that industry. So when one person suffers, everyone suffers. And that community is almost unrecognizable, they say, from what it used to be, because so many men have moved away and so many men have migrated north to find work in the U.S. and along the border. And so it's a town mostly just of women, actually. So anyways, Danielle and Vicki were planning on migrating to the U.S. They didn't have papers, they didn't have necessarily a place to go, but they knew that they would be able to find work there and be able to sustain themselves and their family more than they could in Salvador Urbina. So they made their way as far as Agua Prieta. There's actually a bus that goes directly from Chiapas, their small, tiny little town of Salvador Urbina, directly to Agua Prieta. And it takes about maybe 40 hours on the bus. It's a long, long ride, but the migrant bus goes back and forth at least once a week, I think a couple times a week. So they moved to Agua Prieta and planned to cross the border, but they were both really scared. And so anyways, they just stayed in Agua Prieta and found work at a maquila, which is a foreign-owned factory along the U.S.-Mexico border. And they worked there. I think they were making seat belts, I think. So anyways, they found a family community at the church. And a couple years after being there, they were talking with a man named Mark, who is a Presbyterian minister from South Carolina, actually, who has worked in a border ministry for about 8 years. And they were just having a lot of conversations about migration and about their lives, and had gained a friendship over the past couple of years. And they were both talking about their frustrations regarding not being able to sustain yourselves on your own land, doing your own work in a place that had always been able to produce enough coffee to pay the bills and to feed themselves. And so Mark, coming from the U.S., couldn't really understand that. He couldn't really understand why coffee farmers were not able to make a living when coffee is the second most exported good after oil, and when companies like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts and just Folgers are making so much money in the U.S. and in a place where you can pay $3 or $4 or $5 for a cup of coffee, it seemed just so tragic that the people growing those beans weren't able to feed themselves. So they got together and they started having a lot of conversations about starting their own cooperative, coffee cooperative. And they wanted to use the resources that they already had and the knowledge that they already had to start their own coffee business, since it was the only thing that they knew, but also something that they knew so well and loved so much. So they eventually met with the farmers of Chiapas and proposed this idea to them about starting a cooperative. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to export or send the coffee beans from Salvador Urbina and the Chiapan community to where Danielle and Vicki lived along the border. And so there were already people from Chiapas who had moved there who knew about coffee as well. And so they had the knowledge, the interest, and the passion for coffee and the passion for their families and for making a living. So they eventually started a cooperative, and they roast the coffee beans along the border in Agua Prieta, and they roast and package the coffee there, and then they sell it to a lot of church groups and people who visit the border to learn about the border. And so it's actually been really successful. They started out with about 25 families about 5 years ago, and they now have about 40 families involved in the growing and the cultivating of coffee in Salvador Urbina. And they have about 10 people who work in their roasting and packaging facility there in Agua Prieta. So it's been a way for them to stay connected to their roots and to also allow people to stay on their land. It provides people with an alternative to migration and a way to continue with their lives as if migration wasn't an option or wasn't a necessity that they had to do. Finally, though, after 10 years of living on the border and 10 years of struggling and working, Danielle and Vicki feel like they are comfortable. They're finally secure. They don't have to worry about where their next meal comes from. They don't have to worry about crossing into the United States. They don't have to worry about jumping the fence and walking through the desert. And the wonderful part for them is that they've been able to build cross-border relations. Basically, they've had people from the U.S. come and learn about what's going on in their community and what they're doing as an alternative to migration. And so it's been a way for them to see a more positive side of the United States. A lot of people who are interested in supporting development in Mexico. And it's also been a wonderful way for Americans, Canadians, Germans, people from all over to see the need and the necessity for this development and for grassroots operatives like this. So finally, after about 10 years, Vicki and Danielle were able to get a travel visa. And so after living 2 miles from the U.S. border for 10 years, they can finally cross. And they're really excited about this, not because they need to go and work there, but because they've made so many friends and so many connections with people all over the U.S. And they've had so many people come and visit them and find out about their work that they want to reciprocate and come and be with people in their homes and be in their communities with them.